Morning, Lara. How are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us.
Yes, thanks. I just popped on.
Yeah.
So I've got 6 different PDF flyers
Okay.
that we want to just put up on the screen while we're talking, if that's okay.
Yep. I just enabled screen sharing for you. We don't have the fancy one where I assign permissions. I just have to give everyone access. So,
okay. Well, no worries.
If you see the screen share button at the bottom.
Yeah, I see it. And then, let's see, my first one. Just make sure it works. And then we can get it off and still see everybody's faces, but. Here we go. Do you see it now?
Yep, title insurance, the title process.
Okay, cool. Do you see just the top part, or how does it look? I don't know why I can't see it, but does it look okay if I scroll down, like when I go through it? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Cheryl and I were like, we don't have any we're like, this is gonna be interesting. And I was thinking too, I'll probably shoot you an email with these attachments afterwards.
That'd be awesome.
Pass them along to everyone, because normally we would have brought packets with us. So
yeah, this is great.
I'm gonna run upstairs and tell my son to go upstairs because he's blaring TV and it's gonna annoy me. So I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good.
Good morning.
Good morning, Cheryl. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
We'll just give it another couple minutes and then we'll get started.
Sure.
Steve, I heard you brought in baby Logan yesterday and I'm so mad about it. The one day I was not in the office. What's wrong with you?
I'll bring her again.
Please do. Aww. She's so cute.
Hi.
Hi, everybody.
So cute. How old is she?
She's 5 months tomorrow.
Oh, so sweet. I'm glad she could make the call.
Really?
Yeah.
Start her
Baby
out
Logan
early.
makes it to a lot of our calls.
That's good.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Well, I'm going to go ahead and get us started. Welcome to another morning of agent training. Thanks for making it. I don't know about you guys, but this morning feels earlier than normal. I know it's still 9 o'clock, but I'm like,
I think it's because it's gross out.
Yeah, I'm like, God, 9 o'clock came really early this morning. But thanks for being here. We are joined by Lara and Cheryl Davis of First American Title, and they're going to be teaching us just what you guys need to know about the title process. So, guys, if you wouldn't mind, could both of you start by sharing just a little bit about yourself, where you live, how you got into title, how long you've been working in there, all that good stuff.
You want me to? Okay, she's on mute, so I'll start. I'm Cheryl Davis. I have been in the business extra long, so I don't like to tell it, but over 25 years. And I have done everything in the title business. I have done customer service, closing coordinator, closer, and I've been in sales since 2001. And I grew up in the downtown area. I actually grew up at Garfield Park, then lived by Lily's for 16 years, and now I live by Eagle Creek. So Marion County my whole life. And that's a little bit about me.
So I'm Lara Paul, and I've been with First American now for almost 17 years. I got my real estate license when I was 18 and kind of just started my career in real estate, you know, right out of high school. A little like Cheryl in the fact that I've done a lot with First American and in the industry. I started out as a closing coordinator, and then I managed our REO and relo accounts for some years and did some closings then. And then I've been doing outside sales again since 2014. And I live in the Midtown area, and I grew up Northeast. So grew up, you know, basically in Indianapolis my whole life. That's a little about me.
So good. Thanks, guys. We're so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, if you guys want to go ahead and jump in, teach us everything we need to know, we would love to learn.
Great. We have a kitty joining us now too.
Oh, yeah. So we're going to kind of, Cheryl and I are just going to kind of go through back and forth a little bit and kind of go through some of the processes. But so we've got some flyers that I'm going to be putting up on the screen that we can kind of go through together. But the first one that we wanted to discuss with you is I put up, hopefully you guys can see it, the title insurance process. And this is a good, we'll be sending out these handouts for the event. I'll get them to Rosie so that she has them that she can send to all of you. But this is kind of a good little marketing piece that kind of explains a little bit about what the title insurance process is. So Cheryl and I are both account people, or account executives. So we are in charge of your transaction from very beginning all the way through post-closing. And then we have an awesome team behind us of people that gets, you know, the curatives done and everything else. So kind of going through the way it works is that the title orders get sent to me and Cheryl. We start the title order. So then the order then gets sent to order entry. They get it in the system, and then it goes into where the searcher then goes out and they go and search the property and pull a title search on the property. So, you know, they pull their tax records, they pull any judgments, deeds, they look to see what mortgages are against the property, if there's any federal, state tax liens, anything like that. So they pull together this giant title search that they then put together, and it's just hundreds of pages worth of documents and copies. And then they send that to the title examiner. And then the title examiner takes that search and they review everything, and then they put together the title commitment, which is what you guys receive about a week or so after you place the title order. And that's what tells you what's going on with the property. So the examiner has to look through the entire search and determine what risks, you know, there are against the property, what actual liens are still showing as unpaid against the property. So they put together that title commitment, and then it gets sent out to you guys, and it also gets sent out to me and Cheryl. And then it goes to our curative team. So our curative team is like our closing coordinator team, and then there's a bunch of back-end people that help. But that team then takes the title work, and they look at it and they say, okay, there's a mortgage, or there's two mortgages, or there's judgment or whatnot. And then they go through and they go and clear all of the title so that we can get it clear to close. So that's a little bit about what our curative team does. Cheryl, do you want to say something?
I'm sorry, I was telling my dog to stop barking.
Oh. I saw you talking and I was like, oh, you can interrupt.
No, that's why I'm muted. I'm like, stop barking.
No worries. So anyway, so they put together, you know, the commitment, and then it goes to our processors, and then they, you know, they work to get everything cleared, and they'll work with you and the seller or the buyer, you know, to get whatever information that we need. And then it goes to, hopefully we get the clear to close, and then it goes to the closers, the closing department. And so that's when the closers take over the file from there, and they put together the settlement statement, and they work with the lender, and they make sure that, you know, all the figures match with the purchase agreement, and they put together everything, and then they handle the actual closing and disbursement and recording and everything post-closing. So that's kind of the closing department. And then there's two types of policies, and Cheryl's going to go over the title commitment next, but just to kind of let you guys know, there are two types of title policies. So when you're buying a property and you're getting a lender to help with financing, the lender's going to require that you get a title insurance policy for them, a lender's title policy. But when you're buying a property, you're also going to want to get an owner's title insurance policy that ensures that you're the owner of the property. So the owner's title insurance policy ensures the buyer, and that the buyer has, you know, not first lien position, but the buyer has free and clear title to the property. They own the property. You know, there's no judgments or anything from any prior owners. The loan policy ensures that the lender has first lien position to the mortgage. So I get a lot of questions, especially from new agents and from buyers that are trying to save money because they're like, well, my lender's already making me get title insurance, so I don't want to get the owner's policy. And then we kind of have to step back a little bit and explain the differences, because the lender's policy is literally only ensuring the lender that they have first lien position to that mortgage, so that if you stop making your mortgage payments, they can foreclose. That does nothing to protect your interest in the property. So let's say that there was a judgment against the prior owner that turns out that, you know, the title company missed it, or I'm sorry, it was filed incorrectly, you know, something like that. That's the type of stuff that title insurance covers. You guys have any questions? A little bit about the process and then the policies? Okay, cool. All right, then we're gonna move on, and I'm gonna pull up a title commitment. Okay, so this is our title commitment explanation, and I'm gonna let Cheryl take over here. And Cheryl, just if I need to move things down, I'll try to follow along, but
Yeah,
just
go ahead and go to the main page, because this part I do know. But you
okay, perfect.
So you can have it as a sample.
Yes.
As Laura mentioned, there are two policies. I always highly recommend, whether it's a land contract, a cash deal, whatever the case may be, that you as an agent want to protect yourself and your client. I don't even care if it's family. If it's family, they still need to run a title search, because some people don't know that there's a problem on that title. You know, when they had their closing, everything seemed okay, or if they didn't have a closing. And I always use this example, Rosie's heard it a few times. One of my clients, Southeast Neighborhood Development, acquired 3 lots in Fountain Square. Well, at that time, the properties were only worth like $4,000, but there was $1 million valid open mortgage on that property. And it was 5 prior owners. So there can be horrible, ugly things. And I know you guys are like, that's not possible. It is possible. It really happened. They had a blanket mortgage on every investment property they owned. And it took us 5 months to clear that up. It was ugly. We had to track down prior owner. And luckily they were current on their payments and we were able to clear that. But this is why we sell title insurance and we want to protect people. So I'm going to go through the areas here just to explain what they are. A lot of you have probably seen a title commitment, but don't necessarily know what these items are for. So number 1 is the effective date. Obviously, this is just a sample we've used. We're not back to 2016. We're more current than that, luckily. But we're usually in Marion County, could be anywhere from 3 weeks to 6 months behind, depending on the volume and how quickly they're processing things at the recorder's office. So what the effective date means is this is what's put into the computer system at the county that we have access to. That doesn't mean that there's not a deed or a mortgage out there that we haven't picked up, but this is what's showing in the county records. And when we actually do a closing, we insure to the closing date. So no matter what this date is, we're protecting that buyer, that there are no problems with that property. But we are putting all the information in our title commitment that's a public record as of the date of the effective date on our title commitment. And then number 2 is our title commitment number. That's our file number, the referencing number. And the bottom numbers on that 25, 23, that's just an internal coding. That is actually not part of our title commitment number. It's just the numbers at the top. The number 3 is the amount of the owner's policy. That's how much the buyer is paying for the property. So if that amount is incorrect, we're missing an amendment, an addendum, or a counteroffer. So these are the areas you guys really want to look at to make sure that we have the right information. Number 4 is the way that your buyer is going to take title. So that's going to be the way that the deed shows and the way that our policy shows. So if there's something incorrect on that, we need to get that fixed as well. I know sometimes you'll have 2 people on title or 1 person on title initially, and then you amend it to add somebody or remove somebody during the process due to what the lender requires. So make sure that that does match at the end of the transaction when we're getting ready to close. Number 5, you guys really don't have to keep track of. That's the loan amount. That's up to the lender to let us know. They can add in closing costs or things like that and make adjustments accordingly. So that's not a big deal for you guys to pay attention to. But number 6 is important. We want to make sure we have the right lender. So if you have somebody that's shopping around for different lenders for financing, we want to make sure that the right lender has all of our paperwork. We've had several closings with things moving as fast as they have this year that they've changed lenders, and we still have the old lender when we're sending out a closing confirmation, and they're like, hey, we don't have this loan, and we're like, oops, okay. Now we have to hurry and get everything to the correct lender, and they need this for their underwriting. So we want to make sure that they have all of our paperwork, okay? Number 7 is a big, big deal. That's how the current owner is entitled. So if somebody else signed that purchase agreement and this doesn't match, we could have a little bit of a problem. We always want to make sure that the people have authority to sell that property, not somebody that's house sitting and signing that purchase agreement while somebody's on vacation. We don't run into that very often. What we do run into more often are undisclosed heirs on estates. I have seen that quite a bit where they're like, oh, you know, that one brother you don't want to talk to, he's not important. Unfortunately, all of them are important. So we want to make sure that everybody that has any authority to transfer that property is part of the transaction. And number, yes.
All right, I want to jump in here.
Yes.
How do heirs to estate actually work? Like, do they have to be named in a will, or is that?
There are several different ways.
Okay.
Now they even have a transfer on death deed. There are airship affidavits. There are supervised estates, unsupervised estates. Estates are a whole new animal in itself that we could do a Title 101, or not a Title 101, but a lunch and learn or something on that at a different time, because there are so many different aspects that are involved with that. If it's people that are on title, just 2 people, it depends on how the deed shows for that estate. If it's joint tenants with rights of survivorship or husband and wife, then we just have to record a survivorship affidavit. Mm-hmm. If it's tenants in common, then we have to get into real estate issues. Mm-hmm. So every person's interest in the property determines what we have to do at that point and how the title is held. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Okay.
We are actually thinking about doing a training on estates in November. Yeah. So I'm going to hit you guys up for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. And we'll probably pull in an attorney too, either, to make sure that we cover all the bases, see if Alan can do that. And if not, Chris Strebeck, because I know you guys use him a lot too. But it does get tricky. Laura and I know a lot of it, but we would not be experts at all of it. That's for sure.
I love having a legal department.
Yes.
I call them all the time.
Yes. They're on our speed dial. They're like, hello. Number 8 is the property address. And what people don't realize is the property address is not actually how we transfer title. It's with the legal description. So the lot and the parcel are what we need to make sure are correct. We'll see a lot of times, like on this particular address, that it may have like North Spring Mill Road or no North in it. Those things don't really matter to us. We can make adjustments accordingly to that. But what we do care about is, say this is a totally different address like Main Street that we're pulling up. That's a problem. We know we have something incorrect. Mm-hmm. So we want to make sure that when we're selling the property that we're selling the right one. Not too much and all the property that should be transferred. Okay, you can go to the next page. So the next page, this is all of our legal information, and we don't actually put a lot of information on our Schedule B Section 1. Some title companies may, but we leave it all on our Schedule B Section 2 on what we're going to need. So when we get to that page, then you're going to see that we have our good funds law. This is one of the things that determines how the buyer will bring the funds to the closing. So if it's up to $500, that can be a personal check. $501 to $9,999 can be a cashier certified check. And then $10,000 and over have to be wired. So those are the only way that funds can be brought to the closing table. It's not our rules, it's a state law. So people just need to be aware that that is not something that each title company can choose. It's not an option. You can't bring 3 cashier's checks to total up to $20,000. It has to be a wire. We've even had people go to the banks to get their wire in person and say, well, you know, I need to wire this. And they're like, oh no, you can take a check. Don't tell them, please don't listen to the people at the branch because those tellers may not know, but it is a state law. So if they come with a check, we're going to have to send them back to the bank, and we don't like to do that. So if you get them prepared ahead of time, then they know that they need to wire funds. And then we will also show in this area that there are the, I'll let you scroll down. Okay. That's all of our legal stuff too. The property taxes. So this is going to list whether we have 1 parcel, 2 parcels, or however many parcels. We have some where there's like 37 parcels, which are not actually exciting fun files for all of us to try to decipher what goes to what, but it does happen. So this one just has 1 parcel. So if you know that there are 2 separate parcels and we're missing one, then you need to let us know. Just by using an address without a legal description and without parcel numbers in the purchase agreement leaves it up to anything being pulled up in a search. So I always tell people in your purchase agreements, it's always best to list all the parcel numbers or all the lot numbers that are included in that sale. That way there is no question as to what's being sold and what's being purchased. That's always best. And also, if there is a split in the legal, those don't show up for 2 years. So those have to be disclosed in the purchase agreement. And Laura and I, we need to know that as the title company because we have no way to know that that split is in process. Does that make sense to you guys? Okay. So if taxes were delinquent, we would have information in here. And then the mortgage is what is showing under the number 11, but item 10 on our title commitment. This commitment's very clean. It only has 1 mortgage. I wish my title commitments always look like this, but we see a lot of city liens and things like that in the downtown area. So don't be alarmed. It's very common. It doesn't necessarily mean that there's any money due. Everything could have been taken care of. There may be no violations. It's just a simple release. But as Laura mentioned earlier, we'll have our curative team scrub the file, as we call it, once we have the title commitment complete to see what items are actually going to be an issue. Also, common names. My name's Cheryl Davis. If you pull up Cheryl Davis in a judgment search, there's going to be a whole list of Cheryl Davis judgments. They're not me though, but anyway. So we would have to have a little bit of information from the buyer or seller if we're pulling up judgments. We only search a buyer if a lender needs that, but we do have a lot of lenders that do require that. So don't be alarmed if we have to ask for additional information to check to make sure that that is our party or not. That's our only way to verify.
And just to comment on that, so judgments are different than other liens because they're against your name. So anything that you own, we have to do a judgment search against that name. So so that's just something that I get that question a lot from newer agents about why is this judgment showing she paid it off, you know, a year ago at a different property or things like that. And judgments don't generally get released. So it's one of those things where unfortunately, when your client has judgments, it might be something that they're going to have to clean up or feel like they're cleaning up multiple times. So I just wanted to put that out there because I've had a lot of judgments lately against sellers, just kind of petty ones, but just where people were upset because they thought they were already taken care of. They didn't know why we were showing them again.
Right. Also, like tax warrants, tax liens, anything that could be listed in a bankruptcy doesn't necessarily mean that it is removed from title. And that's a misconception too. And bankruptcies is a whole nother thing that we could go over in a training because there are so many different ways to file bankruptcy and during the process, whether those stay attached to the property or not. So we don't play the attorney, not even on TV. We leave that up to our legal department to check into, but that's one of the things that is a misconception if somebody files a bankruptcy, that it just went away. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, unfortunately. So we will check into that. If somebody's getting divorced or if they are in the middle of a bankruptcy or anything like that, disclosure on that helps us a lot because we do have to, dig into things further on those situations to see what affects our property. So all of those things would be listed in here. And tax sale, if there's something ugly like that. The other thing I like to mention about that for tax sale is we do have a process that we can go through, but it's for properties that were purchased for longer than a year ago from tax sale. Anytime within the year, usually we're going to require that they have a quiet title action because that prior owner still has a right to claim their interest. But, we'll check into that to see, if the time period affects you or if it's something that we can insure. So just let us know that up front too. And then the last part of this, we're going to show a chain of title to show the history of the property. The lenders all need that. And then the very next page, we're going to show the legal description. Most of yours are going to be lots and subdivisions, but this is a meets and bounds. It's just kind of a cool thing for you to see. Sorry, my computer was sending me alert. But the meets and bounds are a little harder to figure out if that's the correct acreage that you want to transfer. So in those instances, which is going to be very rare for you guys, you would want to put, the total acreage that's being transferred to give us an indication as to that. Most of your areas are going to be fortunate enough to have lots and subdivisions, which is much easier to deal with. And then the next pages are all of our legal jargon. You have to have those wherefores and theretos and all that, all the terms of our contract and of our policy. But the great thing about our policy is if someone adds their spouse onto title, that policy is still good. If they transfer it to an LLC, that is a totally different type of policy and a different entity. So I do point that out because we have a ton of investors that are purchasing the properties under their individual name and then transferring to the LLCs. We do have a way that we can, update and do some things for that, but we do charge $100 because it's a totally different policy that we have to submit. But just know that for your information when you're dealing with investors. But all of this stuff really is just pre-printed stuff that's never going to change. It's just part of our commitments always. Do you guys have any questions on all of this stuff that I just spoke about? No? Okay. Thank you.
Cheryl, I actually did have a question about investors transferring title to their LLC.
Yes.
They have to do something with their lender?
No, because their lender's loan is still going to be secured under their individual name. And you really don't want to tell the lender about that because that could alert them for a due on sale clause. Because they'll think that, they no longer have an interest in the property. Usually if people are making their payments and it's not a drastic difference, they're not going to pay attention. If it went from like Cheryl Davis to Laura Paul, they're going to know that I sold the property. That would be totally different. most lenders are familiar with the people putting it into their LLC to protect themselves, so we don't run into that as often. But I wouldn't alert them to it now.
Yeah, that's good to know. Thanks.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Or a trust. I wouldn't do it then either, you know, but those are common things for people to protect themselves.
Well, and with a trust, we're able to use the Eagle policy, and it doesn't void the policy because you're putting it into your trust. But when you're putting it into LLC, I mean, the whole point of an LLC is that it's a new entity. It's protecting you as a new entity. So the way we look at it is it's a new entity, so it voids the owner's policy. So.
Right. And trust is still kind of individually in its own secure way. So they're totally different policies for an entity versus personal people.
Right.
Individuals.
Okay. Well, next we're going to go over a settlement statement. So we have, like, if you saw on the title commitment, we have like a cheat sheet on the front. We did the same thing here for a settlement statement. So obviously we've just got our numbers here. So this is a quick, like, nice little guide for you guys when you're having your first closing. You're like, oh my gosh, where's the tax prorations? Oh, okay, here, you know, number 4, and you can just find it. So this is nice to keep while you're learning where everything goes. But anyways, we'll kind of go through. So we've got the sales price listed up at the top of $90,000. You've got, it looks like the buyer's getting a loan with elements for $88,369. So you've got the credit there for the buyer. And then they've deposited $500. So they're getting a $500 credit for earnest money as well. This shows where the earnest money is being held, whether we have it or the brokerage has it. You've got your tax prorations here. And that's pretty self-explanatory, but, you know, broken out. Obviously, we did these training pieces a few years ago, but they haven't changed. It haven't needed to change much. So, but anyway, so you've got your tax prorations broken out there. And then it looks like the seller is also giving a $3,000 credit here. And then you've got your loan charges below, number 5. So that's going to list all of the buyer's loan fees that they're paying. Oh, yeah.
Can you talk really quickly about taxes? I know that's like not totally your thing, but yeah, just talk about how we pay it in arrears and why it's like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So taxes in Indiana are paid in arrears, which means they're paid a year behind. So the tax bills that are going to be due this November, they're actually for the second half of 2019. So it gets a little confusing when you're representing a buyer or a seller and you're trying to figure out those credits, because they can be, you know, several $1,000s. So in this case, taxes were paid, it looks like, let's see, when was our closing date on this? Okay, so we closed January. All right. And so the taxes were paid in November for the second half. Excuse me. For the second half, they were paid in November. And so it looks like we did correctly. We prorated from January 1st of the previous year to our date of closing at $589.98 a year. So for a total of $610.99. So you're normally, it's about a year generally, but that's kind of, I hate to, depending on where taxes are paid, that can mess it up. Cheryl, do you want to chime in here?
Yeah, it usually is a year. And so your prorations will always be either from January 1st through the closing date or July 1st through the closing date. And so when you pay May taxes, it's from January 1 through June 30th of the prior year. When you pay November, it's from July 1st through December 31st of the prior year. And so that it tends to make a little more sense when people know what amount is paid for what year or what installment, because it's going to be calculated daily when you do the proration, as you see that we're coming up with the annual amount and getting a prorated amount for that day and then taking it to that point of the year. But you will also see taxes on title commitments usually 3 times, which is very confusing for people too. So we not only have taxes in arrears, but we show them 3 times on our settlement statement, which is very confusing. But if you keep those dates in mind, it helps you to explain the proration better to your clients.
Right. You always got to remember where we're at and whether May or November was paid, and then kind of work back from there.
Yes.
Does that make sense? Okay. Yeah. Okay. So so number 5 on that cheat sheet on the front, you know, shows the loan charges, and you can kind of see them all broken down here for the buyer. Number 6, this is the impounds. This is like prepaids. So the lender, if they're getting financing, the lender's going to be required to take a few months homeowners insurance, property taxes, and hold them in escrow so that they can pay those bills when they become due. So that's what this is. But there's some kind of formula that the lender can only hold so much in those impounds. So that's why you see this aggregate adjustment. So they wanted to hold three months of insurance and 5 months of taxes. So they've got that, but then their formula or whatever in their computer said, no, you're collecting too much. So that's why they're getting this credit back of $112.85. So you'll see that a lot on the buy side of things, and that's why they're getting that aggregate adjustment. There's some kind of formula that states they can only hold so much, and that's why that gets adjusted there. And then number 7, this is where all of our fees come into play. So you've got, you'll see here on the left side, the $248 is the title insurance for the owner's policy. And then on the right, you've got the lender's policy. You can kind of just go through and you'll see all of our charges between the buyer and seller's side. Number 8 is commission. So that's very important for you guys to know where that is. Please check your commission. I know we have a lot of times like after closing where we get emails and it's like, hey, I was supposed to get an extra % or things like that. So just double check it. We ask for commission during the process, but sometimes I've had listing agents give us the wrong commission, which is awful. But it happens where they think, it's 6% and it was supposed to be 7%. And then we go off of what the listing agent told us. And then we're scrambling afterwards because we didn't collect enough, so just things like that sometimes happen. So double check the commission.
Can I
below that?
point something out too?
Yeah.
What's a new thing for new agents? One of the things that I have most of the questions on is if you have the listing side, like Platt would hold the earnest money or First American would hold the earnest money. So in this case, the listing company was holding the earnest money. So you'll see in the column that it's less money because it's commission less earnest money because you're already holding that. But that is confusing because, the process takes a few weeks and then you're like, oh yeah, I forgot. So
thanks for mentioning that.
Your money.
That does happen a lot with new agents on the listing side. They don't know why they don't have their full commission. And then we have to, make sure that, okay, you do have the earnest money, right?
Right.
So, okay. And so below that, we've got recording charges and things like that. And then you've got your payoffs, your seller's payoffs listed below that. And then we don't have any more little cheat numbers, but miscellaneous is just going to be any other third party fees. So you've got like the broker commission fee, some brokers have those transaction fees and things like that. They don't get listed in the commission, they get listed down here. You've got deed prep, homeowners insurance, things like that. It looks like the seller paid the taxes ahead of time and they maybe just weren't, the lender wanted them to show that they were paid. So that's why when you see this POC in the inside columns ever on a settlement statement, that means paid outside of closing. And then the S means by seller. So you'll see POCB a lot of times, like when it comes to appraisals and things like that, and you'll see it on the inside column like this. So it's not an actual charge or a debit. But that's just in case you ever see POC, that's what that means. And then that's kind of it. So do you guys have any questions in here? I'll go back to the cheat sheet, but we'll make sure to get this out to you guys, but this is kind of a nice little cheat sheet for you guys just to have to look for when you're getting your next settlement statement. Any questions on the settlement statement? No. Okay, cool. So Cheryl's going to talk about costs first.
That's an amazing app. If you guys don't have this, you're going to love it. So you start out on your desktop. As you can see at the top right, it comes in different languages. It doesn't necessarily mean that your client doesn't speak English, but, you know, say that they want to share that with a family member, they can, you know, you can access it in different languages for them to share. And, you know, Indianapolis is very diverse. Indiana is very diverse. So we want to make sure that everyone can have full ability to use this and benefit from it. So it will do net sheets, which is what most people use it for. It also does a net first, which actually works the fees backwards. And I love that because you have a lot of sellers that will say, hey, I need to walk away with $10,000. I don't really care what the sales price is or how this works out, as long as I walk away with $10,000. So you can work things that way. You plug in the amount that you need, and then it calculates it backwards. But what I do point out to people, the only little glitch in that is it may show the sales price as like $257,327.20. Well, nobody's going to use that as a sales price. So use something that makes sense just so they get their money. But as you put the fees in that you're going to have as the transaction, it'll start adjusting that price. It's really cool. And there are also ways to compare multiple offers under this app. And so if you have 5 offers, it can do side-by-side comparisons. It can be confusing to people because they think always the highest offer is the best offer, but that's not always the case. You guys know this, depending on what the buyer is asking for. If they want closing costs and a bunch of things, then it could end up being that, you know, an offer that was for a lower sales price actually ends up giving them more money in their pocket. So there are great features in here. There's also rent versus buy that you can use for marketing. It's really good for a quick look for buyers on how much they need, how much they would make, how much the payment would be at that price. You do not want to use it though for all of a buyer's closing costs, because every lender is going to be a little different as far as interest rates, their closing costs and everything. But for a quick glance, you can use it at that. So you want to sign up on your desktop first. You can actually put your logo, your picture. You can put pictures of the houses on it. You can customize it. It's really a cool app. And then you can download the app from your app store on your phone. So if you were going to a listing appointment, you'd have your net sheet all ready to go for your client. And then you get to the home and you've saved it. You need to make a few adjustments. You can make those adjustments from your phone and email them to your client right there sitting at their kitchen table. It's really, really awesome. When you enter the zip code in, it's going to automatically pull in the property taxes. It's very user friendly. So as you tab to each of the fields, there's either a drop down or to pick buyer seller split, or it's automatically popping in because it's part of the features that we automatically do. So home warranty will automatically pop in, and a homeowners association transfer. If those are not going to apply to you, you can zero them out. But I always tell everybody at the beginning of a listing, you always want to leave things in there. So for a little cushion, it's always better to over disclose than to under disclose. They're always happy if they get more money, and they're going to have a little bit of a fit if things are working out to their disadvantage at the end of the day. So some of those features you can make adjustments, and there's even a little area for miscellaneous if you want to add something that you think may need to be a repair bill or something along that line. It's good to add that feature in there at the beginning.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I do have a lot of agents that use the miscellaneous to put in inspection repairs.
Yeah.
And they just guesstimate, I think, a percentage, you know, of what they think that the repairs might be at the beginning of the listing, of, you know, where they're going to be when they get an offer. And then another thing, you know, Cheryl had mentioned that the taxes automatically populate when you put in the address and the zip code. What's also nice about it is that it prorates the taxes too. So it's going to assume that the taxes are paid current because otherwise you get off by taxes are delinquent, maybe
Installment,
off a little bit. But provided taxes are current, it does automatically do those tax prorations for you as well. So it's so nice now, because you used to have the tax information to be able to complete the net sheet. And now it just pulls in the tax information. It's great.
Yeah, it's really user friendly. And I just suggest that you guys play with it and save them. And then when you go back into the open area, there'll be like a little paper at the top left, and then go back into your saved items. You can edit those. It's just really a cool app that you guys are going to end up loving, and very user friendly.
I can do a net sheet on it in like 30 seconds to a minute, if that. I mean, it's super simple. So it's just really nice. You don't have to think a lot. It pulls in the taxes. It prorates them for you. I mean, it's literally just clicking a few buttons. It populates all of our fees in. So it's just putting in some basic information and then just clicking a few buttons just to make sure, okay, they are paying the closing fee, or they're splitting it, or things like that. I mean, it's super, super simple. So if you guys, aren't registered, I encourage you to register. And then if you've got questions, let Cheryl and I know, and we can walk through a net sheet, if you guys want to go through them together or whatnot.
Guys, this is what Jess was talking about yesterday in the presentation to sellers. This is what she puts in the very back of her folder when she's doing a listing presentation, so she'll pull out at the end.
So there's also an area though where they can sign it, which is kind of a nice feature, especially at the beginning of your listing. You can sign it and date it. So you can have them keep track of the changes that are going on. You can even, email that to yourself and upload it to DocuSign or anything. So you have, a little tracking system out as to how things adjusted in the process for them.
Yep. Okay, any other questions? Okay, we got 2 more things to go over quickly. So Zachem is our newest product. And I'm just really excited about it, because we finally have a way that we can get our electronic earnest money deposits. So anyways, it's called Zachem. It's a third party. It's not owned by First American. However, we've agreed to eat the fees. I know that there's like a company called Earnest, I believe, that a lot of agents are starting to use, that I've heard about. Yeah, and I think Rosie, I was going to say, I thought Rosie maybe just mentioned this to me yesterday, but I know that there's a charge for that service. And that's something that Zachem does have a charge as well, but it's something that First American we're absorbing that fee. We don't think that we should be passing on a $7 fee to the buyer for wanting to send us earnest money, So anyway, so we're absorbing those fees. But you download it from your phone. Your clients can upload the information directly, or the check directly, if they want to do it. The only thing is that they have to have, for security reasons, they need to have a purchase agreement to upload with it. So if you're going to have your buyer do it directly, then you want to make sure that they have a PDF of the contract to upload. I've heard that there's a workaround there, that if you don't have a contract, you can use like just a piece of paper and type,
put the address and their name and stuff. Yeah.
Address and name and stuff on it and upload it. It's just, it won't accept the check by itself. It's got to have some kind of contract. So you can trick the system by just uploading a piece of paper with the buyer's name, property address, things like that. That will allow us to accept the deposit. But unfortunately, that's one thing that you have to upload something,
Well, so and a lot of times the earnest money comes to us through Zachem, because it literally comes to us within like an hour or less before we have the order. So it is good to at least have the first page of the purchase agreement, so we can, attach it
all the time. Because we're used to, in the old days, checks were mailed. So by the time we received them in a day or two, we had the order, or they were hand delivered to our office, and generally they were hand delivered with the order. So now we've got like the cart before the horse. We're getting all this earnest money in, but we don't have the contracts. We're like, where does this go? So now that's why you have to upload something, just so we have a cross-reference, and it's for security reasons, because we're taking money, we're putting them in a large escrow account. We got to make sure we're keeping track of everything. But what's great about it, the buyers that we have had use it, I know have really enjoyed it. Anyways, it's pretty simple. You upload a copy of the check like you would do a banking deposit. And then you just upload the contract or the piece of paper or just something so we have reference. And it's just that simple. And then we get it like in an hour later and we receipt it. And it's beautiful. It's very beautiful. I love this. I mean, because I will say probably for the last 15 years, I've been asked weekly, daily, can you guys take electronic deposits? And I'm like, no, we can't. So it's really nice that we now can. Yeah. So anyway, so Zachem. So that's just an app that's free that you can download to your phone.
And you'll love it. It's so user-friendly too.
Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, Lara, I have a quick question. So I was actually looking into this for the brokerage. At least for our listings, we're typically the escrow holder and we're holding the earnest money. So there must be other brokerages where if we're the buyer's agent perhaps the list side is having the earnest money held by title.
Yeah.
I think that's mainly how we would interact with it is from the buyer side.
Yeah, because generally you guys do hold on to your earnest money, and it's going to be those. A lot of times there's smaller brokers that may not have escrow accounts, those independent type brokers. So that's why you see a lot of times a listing agent maybe put in the contract, title company to hold earnest money. A lot of times it's those independent brokers that don't have an escrow account. So they just want title and handle it.
Well, and I've seen just with COVID that even the big companies are having us hold them a lot now. We've had a lot of Keller Williams, Remax, a lot of the companies because, just having to deal with that from people working remotely. So it's a great benefit no matter what the case may be.
Yeah, that's good. Okay. All right. Cheryl's going to take us home. And she's going to talk about our secure portal.
Okay, the secure portal is amazing, and we keep adding new features constantly to this. So currently right now, the biggest use is for the buyer and seller. The seller can give us all of their payoff information, social security number securely through this. And what it does, it has a little, it's a double authentication. It's similar to hospitals or banks on how they do their loan apps or how my doctor's office does all of this stuff to get all of your personal information in the most secure manner. And it will let them answer some questions and even pre-sign some of their closing documents. So they'll go through a little question answer on the seller side. Are they going to be at the closing? If not, do we have a power of attorney? So whatever their answers are to these questions will lead them to the next question. So people always ask if we have a sample. We do, but the system modifies to their needs. So that's why we hate to really put it out there. And then you go over that with your client and then it's like, okay, that's not what mine did at all. You gave me all the wrong information. So it customizes and modifies to what their needs are. If they're going to be at the closing, they're not going to have a power of attorney. It's not going to continue to ask questions about that. It's really nice though, because like if they are not going to be able to attend the closing and they have answered some of this, that's less paperwork we have to send to the seller. And it is the most secure way. So you guys don't have social security numbers that you're dealing with and they're not passing them off to somebody else. It just goes straight into our system. So there's no paper that's laying on someone's desk with social security numbers on it. So it's a great benefit to you and a great benefit to your sellers. And for buyers, they can get wiring instructions in the most secure manner this way as well. So we don't have to send it to them in a secure email that they keep getting blocked out because they tried to log into it 12 times. I hate secure emails, but I'm sorry we have to send them when we're sending wiring instructions. But I'm one of those people that's like, I hate those secure emails. I keep getting locked out. So it's one of those things that will benefit the buyer to get their wiring instructions. And we can send those at any time, but you just need to let us know. It's not something we would automatically send to them. So if we have a email and cell phone number, we will send them a link to the secure portal within 24 to 48 hours of receiving the order and having it processed. So it's usually 2 to 3 business days after we get the order from you that your buyer or seller would get a link to our secure portal. I have had 90% of people love it and probably 8% ignore it because they, you know, they think it's spam. And there's only been about 2% that don't like it. Most people nowadays like these types of systems because they know how secure they are and prefer that over the paper trail and having to put their social security number on a piece of paper.
Well, and I've had a few times where they answered the questions on the dynamic questionnaire. Yeah. And then we had to call the agents and say, it looks like they're not going to be at closing. And the agent's like, they're not going to be at closing? They weren't even communicating with their agent well. And so we were able to kind of, you know, help them also set expectations because we knew earlier on, you know, so that's one thing that helps because we have so many last minute requests, you know, where people are, you know, I just found out that my buyers aren't going to be in town on Tuesday, you know, it's just things like that. And when they get the questionnaire and they're going through the portal, it just kind of helps them start thinking about those things, you know, like, am I going to be at closing? Well, no, I'm not, you know, so it's just been really helpful a little bit because we've just been able to jump on those needs a little bit faster.
Yeah, and it could really help. And then we're getting ready to roll out. We don't have it quite yet, but there will be a realtor part of this that's rolling out soon. So we'll be excited to give that information to you very soon. But that is the exciting part of this. And this is also free. None of these, you know, products that we're talking about cost you or your client. Do you have any questions on this one? Okay, so if we have 2 sellers, I want to point this out, 2 sellers or 2 buyers, we need phone numbers and emails for each one of those parties. So if we only had 1 seller email and phone number, it won't send the link out. We have to make sure that both sellers want to be part of that secure portal to make it work. Okay, that's it on that one.
Okay. I think, I mean, that was all the content that we had to go over, but we can just open this up to general questions.
Well, we did have a few exciting things to tell you though.
Oh, that's true.
From our North office is going to be moving downtown and she's very experienced and great. You guys will love her. She's going to be the closing coordinator at our downtown office. We're so excited.
Tomorrow.
That's awesome. Yeah. What's her name?
Taylor Hall.
Taylor Hall. And you guys, she's been with us for 6 months or so, I would say. She came from the lending background. She was with a lender for like 10 years. So she's just really sharp. Yeah. And she's been at our North office for about 6 months working up there. And when the downtown position became available, she wanted to move downtown, which we were so excited about because that meant we didn't have to like start over with somebody that we had to train.
Like, yeah, she knows our system and all the stuff, so it's just going to be
doing.
Yes.
Man, that's awesome. Congrats, guys.
She starts tomorrow, so that's exciting. And then we have, I know we're going to, part of Taylor coming downtown, we've created a designated email for Platt that will just help with the customer service. We just want to make sure that she, you know, doesn't get bombarded by throwing this email on her the second that she gets downtown. We want to get her comfortable.
We're going to give her a day or 2.
We're going to give her like a few minutes to catch the breath, and then we're going to shove all this back. I'm teasing, but no, I think that will help. So look for that to launch here in the next week or 2. But basically, we've created a designated email for all of Platt. And that email will come to Taylor. It'll just be a little bit quicker service, you know, things like that. So we're excited about that as well.
That's fantastic, guys. Thanks. Yeah. My favorite question to ask you guys as we wrap up is your horror stories. I feel like Title has like the best, like, oh my God, there was a son we didn't know about. And I always like to ask what is going on in your world.
You mentioned estates. My biggest horror story in my career, and I'm sure Cheryl has me beat probably because she's had some crazy stuff, but my scariest was about 2 years ago, over, I think it was Memorial Day, either 2 or 3 years ago. I had an investor client that I work with a lot call me, and he got a property under contract with a seller and they needed to close right away, you know, and that should have been a red flag. Sometimes, just FYI, when people are screaming at us that they got to close in 2 days, we're like, why? You know, hold on, we're underwriting this. That can be a red flag, you know? So anyways, they wanted to close, but I vetted the file as much as I thought I could. It was a seller that was an heir. The investor I was working with went and met with her. Everything seemed on the up and up type of thing. So in this case, her father owned the property, had passed. She said she was the only one that owned the property. There was no estate open. There was no will. So that's when we kind of vetted it and we're like, okay, well, we can do an heirship affidavit. So basically an heirship affidavit is an affidavit where you're stating like, hey, I'm Lara, daughter of Jim, and I'm the only living heir to this property. You're kind of swearing under oath on this affidavit that you are telling the truth. Well, her brother called me screaming at me about 2 weeks after I closed on this house, and he wanted to know why I sold his dad's house and you know, all these horrible, awful things. And yeah, she like committed fraud. So we ended up, you know, I know that she went to jail. That wasn't because we sent her, it was because her brother did, you know, for fraud. And then I know that that property was tied up for like 7 months because the brother wanted a ridiculous amount of money. He was very angry that this happened. So he was playing hardball. So what was really bad, the nightmare of this, is that my investor, you know, had already dumped a bunch of property in or money into the property, and then they were going to flip it. So they couldn't flip it because there's a cloud on title, because they only own half the property, because the sister only transferred her ownership of half of the interest property because she lost. So I was getting calls, you know, weekly from my investor wanting to know an update, and it was like, well, it's in legal. I don't know, they're fighting about money, you know. It was awful. That was probably the worst experience that I've had as a title person, because, you know, it was just crazy. I mean, she lied to me, she lied under oath, she lied on everything, and then the brother was so angry and was like stalking me for a while, and then the investor was stalking me, and I was just so. But title insurance, we ended up getting the property paid, and so we ended up we paid off the brother. We came to a settlement. He signed a deed over for his interest of the property. My client was made whole. Luckily, he was able to rent the property the entire time. So he was getting some income during that 8 months that it took us to, you know, figure out how to get him the full house. But yeah, it was crazy. That was my craziest. I'll let Cheryl take it over, but that was mine.
I have
See, this is why I love this question, because you learn things that are like, what the hell?
There was a lot of crying going on those 8 months.
This is why you need title insurance, and don't trust anybody. Trust me. People go, what would you do with your own family? I'd still do a title search. I'm not going to lie. And I love my family. But
I've seen too many family members screw over other family members on accident because they didn't realize that their brother had a judgment, or
on purpose.
Oh yeah, or on purpose.
So, well, I'll bring up Sherry Caldwell's deal, because that was a doozy. So
my best friend.
I know.
Buying the house.
Yes. So, okay. So the property addresses went like, I don't remember the exact address, but it was like
1418 Market.
12 Market. I knew it was Market. Okay. So 1214, 1216, 1220, then back to 1218. Well, no address does that. I don't care where you live in what state. They're not going to jump and then go back in sequence. So it was a property that was a tax sale property that investor bought and rehabbed and did a beautiful job. And so the two addresses, somebody switched not only did they switch the street sign, like the house numbers, they also had somehow gotten the city to change things. So they rehabbed the wrong home, basically. They didn't own the home, they rehabbed. Correct. I'm not lying. The lot and everything matched this okay, Rosie's gonna laugh, but it looked like a crack house next door. And they were the proud owner after putting $80,000 into it to own this home that was not in good shape, that needed a lot of work. Well, mind you, that home next door had 2 mortgages. They had all kinds of debt. So my poor investor, we had to get, of course, attorneys involved and deal with the city to get things straightened out. And people didn't even believe it. I was talking to so many people at the city. They were like, what? How did this happen? I'm like, well, you tell me, because you guys changed your records. I mean, one minute this property was this address and the next minute it's this address. And the lot never changed. It's the same lot, the same plat. You can't change the way that was. I know Steph is like, what?
Sorry, I'm just trying to like, what? That doesn't.
No, it does happen. It did happen. Trust me. This is,
oh my God.
Why you need title insurance, because when I ran the title commitment, I'm like, we don't show your client owns this property. And they're like, well, yeah, they do. And I'm like, no, they don't. And so anyway, it took us a few months. It was a horrible ordeal dealing with attorneys, the city. And this poor investor had to buy the neighbor's property and pay off their mortgages and then sell it back to them on land contract because they had shitty credit. Yes, because you know what? He never had title insurance when he bought that property. So, you know, the worst stories can be our best selling features because I could have helped him in the beginning. But unfortunately, we got it all cleared up. It cost this seller even more money. But at the end of the day, you know, he was able to sell the property and get
what was the city's explanation?
They don't have an explanation. And they're all, you know, one department tried to blame it on another department. But I'm telling you, things that should get changed don't, and things that shouldn't get changed do. We see it happen all the time. It could have been somebody that knew somebody doing him a favor for drugs, or who knows. I mean,
what department downtown even would handle that?
Well, I had to deal with all the departments because it was wrong everywhere. It was wrong at the treasurer, the assessor, the auditor, and GIS mapping. So they're all different divisions. And it was a pretty big ordeal. The attorney even had to go to court over some things to get some things changed. Yeah. Because
it was crazy. This was this all came up because my friend was buying that house from the investor. And then it was like,
just kidding. You don't own this house.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man.
So that's one of the big ugly ones. And then I have another one that was a foreclosed property that the bank only acquired half of the property. So we had to go back several owners because they literally only purchased one lot. And so the house was built like right here on one lot and right here on the other lot. And the other lot was in somebody else's name. They bought it at tax sale. So half their house was owned by the bank and half it was tax sale. People don't believe this stuff, but I have proof in those files that this stuff actually happened.
That one doesn't surprise me at all because when I managed the REO stuff, I can't tell you how many strict foreclosures I had to wait on because the foreclosure attorney didn't do a proper title search or list everything in the foreclosure. And then so it was time for us to, now the bank owns the property and it was time for me to sell the property, get the property to closing. And we find out there's liens on title that weren't cleared in the foreclosure and things like that. So then we have to go back to the foreclosure attorney and they have to reopen the foreclosure and do a strict foreclosure. And it was just craziness.
Lara, what does REO stand for?
Oh, it stands for real estate owned. I never really understood that term, but it's just bank owned properties. So it's an asset owned by a bank.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
They say that it's called that because like the banks would have like lists of their assets and then there'd be a list of real estate owned and that would be all the
real estate owned
like properties they owned.
REO. Yeah.
This is kind of a non sequitur, but this is from my past life and you guys have like triggered this memory to the surface. And so I just want to like ask your thoughts about it. So I'm have an event production business and I used to produce the Warrior Dash mud runs. And in 2014, it's a long story. In 2014, yeah, it's a whole thing. We were in a small town in Alabama called Warrior, Alabama, literally population like 100. And we were on a venue that the company had rented for this. We literally were like the Friday before the race is on Saturday. Part of the land, there was like two brothers, and one of them was like, just kidding, you guys are on my property. And we had like built all these obstacles on half of the property. Oh, no. Literally like thousands of dollars, and you know how those things are. Yeah. So like, and then he was like, it's Alabama, I'm gonna shoot and kill anyone that trespasses. Oh, no. And so we were all like, great, there's 14 of us, there's like 4 people here that are 18 years old, like we're all gonna die. And so our legal team got involved, but it was literally like one was the brother of the guy who had left the property and one was the son of the guy. Oh. And it went back and forth. And then it was like the brother wanted more money because he had said that was his property. Right. And we ended up just like literally abandoning those obstacles and rerouting the entire course. So they're probably still there to this day. But I'm just thinking like from a title perspective, like was it just that there was no deed? Was it that it was like verbal? Like did no one?
So the foreclosure one or the other one?
Well, this one that I'm like, that it's just like random.
No, when they did the foreclosure, like Laura was saying, they didn't list all of the property. So it didn't go through the full foreclosure. So that property ended up going, the other part of the property, half the house, went to tax sale, and that person bought it from tax sale knowing that they would end up getting some money out of somebody one day.
Yeah.
And did nothing with it, just sat there and waited for their money, which is kind of a smart thing to do because they get money.
I've just always thought about that. Like, how did no one find that in an estate?
It was an attorney error. Yeah. But you know what? I mean, it's simple typos can really make a big mistake. They should have had 2 lots listed and they only listed 1. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God.
But the other one was definitely a shady scam that was Rosie's friend. That was not somebody's mistake. That was an intentional fraud that somebody did. Yeah. That was definitely. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, Lara and Cheryl.
So fun things, but you know, the exciting life of title.
Thank you guys so much. I always learn so much every time you come, so I appreciate your time.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Hope to meet all of you in person.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, it'll be nice when we can all see each other in person again for sure.
Yes.
Great. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thanks, guys.